Good morning. It is Thursday, May the 9th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, one of only two and possibly five, but I'm going to leave it at two for right now, true conservatives in the United States of America today, because the president and myself are the only ones that make the presumption for the status quo. The other three would be Ayn Rand, John Cobalt, and Ken Champeau, although all three would argue with it, and at least Ayn Rand would probably be horrified to hear herself be called a conservative. She considered conservatism wrong and weak, but as a matter of fact, I think she is a true conservative. So I was listening to Hugh Hewitt this morning. I was listening to Hugh Hewitt, and after that I listened to Glenn Beck, and then Rush Limbaugh, and then a little bit of Sean Hannity, maybe. Yeah, just a little bit of them, and then I move over to the John and Ken show. And so anyways, I'm listening to Hugh Hewitt, and he's talking again about drug prices. He's on and on about the idea of having price controls for drug prices. He thinks this is going to be the way to deal with out-of-control drug prices and teach the pharmaceutical companies a lesson. As far as he's concerned, they're just greedy, and that's the only reason that that prices are so high. He does recognize, however, that patents are playing a role in this, because as I've said before, if you've got a law that exempts you from competition for 6, 8, 10 years, no wonder the prices are high. You can charge whatever you want, and people have to pay it. So that's certainly one issue, and I'm glad that he has discovered that the patent laws perhaps need to be taken a look at, and I really think that they should be changed, and so that there can be competition, and I think that will go a long ways toward driving prices down. But also what Hugh Hewitt, what really bothers me about it is he claims to be a conservative, and yet he's out asking for price controls. Price controls are socialist, period. There's no doubt about that. And so this is a situation where he contradicts himself. Because he contradicts himself, he is rhetorically ineffective. He is not going to have the integrity and therefore the credibility and therefore the influence that he should have as a conservative pundit. So he needs to get himself squared away and find another solution. I would suggest that one place to look at is to bring changes to the patent laws, and that another possibility is, of course, the ultimate possibility in terms of prices for our healthcare as a whole would be to return to the gold standard, to get rid of Keynesian economics, which is what allows our government to be involved in our economy in the first place. And if the government's going to get involved in one part of the economy, it's going to end up getting involved in all parts of the economy, because it only makes sense. So, and that's part of what's going on here, and that's part of the reason I think he's asking for price controls, is because the government is already, deeply involved in our economy, and that's the way it is worldwide, by the way. But our government is deeply involved in our economy thanks to Keynesian economics. Move to the gold standard, we get the government out of the economy, and we can get back to a market-based system in which we, the consumers, help to determine the prices rather than having the government trying to control them. So another issue is as far as healthcare is concerned, I hear so many people talking about that we have a healthcare system, and that's exactly the way the left wants it to be. The left wants us to talk in terms of a system, because a system implies socialized medicine. It implies something that is given to us or taken away from us by government. that the proper way to think of it and to communicate about healthcare is as a market. It's not much of a marketplace anymore. It used to be when I was growing up as a kid, you could go to whatever doctor you wanted to, and if that doctor was charging too much money, then you would go find somebody else, and that way you kept prices were kept reasonable. That's the best way to do it, is to have the consumer directly involved in the transaction without having the government getting in between. But in any case, like I said, you need to, when you're hearing people that are talking about a healthcare system, remind yourself it's not a system, it's a market. And markets, our system is socialist, market is capitalist / conservative. So that's the way to remember it. One thing that I was listening to when I was listening to Glenn Beck, and he was talking a couple of things that struck me as wrong. Number one, that he said that compassion has to temper reason. He's been on and on about compassion, and he's a born-again Christian, and I think he's also he may be a recovering alcoholic like myself, and so he's been getting into the Bible and getting into Christianity, and that's a good thing. But the problem is that socialism has, one of the excuses for socialism is compassion. And so compassion and, dealing with the poor, being charitable, I guess, to the poor is, though those Christian ideas, there also happen to be socialist excuses. So there's a lot of times where a Christian can be communicating in a way in which they think they are promoting Christianity, and what they're doing really instead is promoting socialism. And that's the case here with the compassion versus reason. He didn't, by the way, state why it is that compassion should temper reason. So compassion, as far as I'm concerned, is simply a weapon used by the left, a stick with which to hit people over the head, make them feel guilty, and so it's an empty word, again, just used basically as a weapon. There is no such thing as compassion as considered as a virtue. There's 7 virtues, 4 cardinal and 3 biblical virtues: faith, hope, and charity. And so charity would be the one that perhaps the better word to be using here. It's a Christian term, and it also is not something that can be used as a weapon. Charity is something that you can use in terms of action, and describes action, something that you're going to be doing to help those that have fallen on hard times, or people that are poor, or otherwise in trouble. So, whereas compassion is really describing or attempting to describe an emotion, how you feel, and has a manipulative quality to it. And again, is very often used as a weapon by the left. And to get out from under that, instead of, don't you have any compassion, is what you hear usually from the left, then you want to respond with the word charity. Make sure your response has the word charity in it. I'm a charitable person. I do this, I do that, I help out here, I help out there, I help out those that are in need, not that it's any of your business. Because the other part of the double-edged sword of asking somebody whether or not they're compassionate is you're getting in somebody else's business. It's nobody's business whether I'm compassionate or whether I'm charitable. That's between me and my family, and or me and God, and not between me and Mr. Socialist. The other thing that he was talking about that really set off alarm bells for me, this is Glenn Beck, was he said that part of the reason he says that we're having, he says that the trouble with the country today, you hear a lot of pundits say that, but the trouble with the country, what's wrong with the country today? Well, for the most part, there's nothing wrong with the country. That's a bad attitude. The country is damn good most of the time for most people. There are some trends that are troubling, but then again, those are trends that you and I can stop dead in their tracks. And anyways, one of the things that he was saying was that the problem with the world is that, or the country today, is that we aren't listening to each other. He says that conservatives should treat the other guy, quote, as the expert, unquote, so that you listen. Because supposedly they are the expert on being themselves, on who they are, and on their point of view. And don't try to be right. That's what everybody is doing today. And it is so, what he said right there is so wrong. It's incredible. First of all, listening to somebody because they're the expert on who they are is subjectivist. It is a way of suggesting that all realities are man-made realities and that we have nothing in common. If we have nothing in common, then we have nothing to talk about and nothing to listen to or listen for. Or there's no reason to have a conversation if we have no basis on which to have that conversation. In other words, if we have nothing in common. And then he says that everybody's trying to be right today. Baloney. The left has set up in this country, in our culture, they have gotten rid of, for the most part, right and wrong. They've taken it out of our conversation. And the way they've done that is through the use of understanding. Every time you try to express a value statement, or every time you try to judge yourself or others, which we can do because we have things in common, the left will come out, and the way they will defeat it, number one, they can either do it the direct way, which is to say, don't judge, you'll hear that, or what they will do, you'll hear most of the time, is statements of understanding, or attempting to understand, in which case what they will be doing is making an excuse. If you judge somebody, well, the boss is a real jerk because he gave me a really short deadline on this and it's not necessary. And then your coworker is going to say, well, maybe he's having a bad day today. Maybe his wife is giving him problems. Maybe he's having a tough time with the kids. Maybe. He's making all these excuses. And what they're doing is they're trying to create a sense of understanding. And the idea is to have the understanding replace the judgment. And if you're not making judgments, you're not expressing values. And if you have no values, what do? How do you answer the question, what should I do now? You have to look to others. You have to look to leaders. You have to submit to power, to the left, to socialists and socialism. So trying to be right is not what everybody is doing today. It sounds like it at first blush if you hear people talking, but if you listen carefully, especially to people on the left, you'll find that they fail to make value statements. Debbie Wasserman Schultz the other day was being interviewed, and she was talking about the President Trump and President Trump's idea of taking the illegal aliens that are coming across the border right now and sending them to sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. Theoretically a good idea because sanctuary cities and states all say, we have open arms. We welcome you. Okay, here they are. And then what do the Democrats do? The Democrats don't come out and say no, first of all. They don't say stop, don't do that. Okay, they don't say that President Trump is wrong. What they say is that he is using they make an arbitrary statement or an arbitrary accusation that President Trump is using the immigrants as a weapon. And so Debbie Wasserman Schultz said words along the same line. She says that he's basically using them as a political weapon or as a political tool or political pawn and in a political game. So she hasn't really said anything. She hasn't made an accusation, but if you're not listening carefully, it's going to sound like it. And the reason it sounds like it is tone of voice. A lot of times the left gets away with a whole lot because of tone of voice. And if you put their tone of voice aside for a second and you listen to exactly what it is that they're saying and then start asking them questions, you're going to find that their whole attitude starts to break down. If you ask her, what do you mean by using them as a weapon? Who is it that he's trying to hurt? for instance. If you're using a weapon, if I've got a knife in my hand and I'm using it as a weapon, then obviously there's somebody that I'm trying to hurt. Who? So same thing, question goes here that should have been asked of Miss Wasserman Schultz if the interviewer had been listening to what she was saying and not just listening to tone of voice. So, but those are the issues of the day that I'm take up with the ersatz conservatives, the people that are really reactionaries, or in Glenn Beck's situation, he's an idealist. So really, he's just the opposite sign of the socialist coin. And then you have Hugh Hewitt, and Hugh Hewitt is not only not conservative, but he's really not even a reactionary. Hugh Hewitt is really almost narcissistic in that his whole show is really about him. It's got nothing to do with being conservative. It's got really nothing to do with politics. It's just got to do with Hugh Hewitt, who Hugh Hewitt is, and why he's a great guy, and how many people he knows, who he knows, how he knows them, and so it's very Midas, or narcissistic. Narcissus was the guy in Greek mythology who saw his reflection in a pool of water and fell in love with himself. And so he has that. It has that very much self-love kind of thing that he has a radio show because he likes to hear the sound of his own voice more than anything else. But that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.